Welcome back to Taxonomies of Learning with Lisa Murphy, Tiffany Pearsall, and me, Liz Nolasco. You're listening to Pre-Primary Sources, and here's your conversation that was already in progress.
Because, yeah, you do kind of need to know some knowledge before you can comprehend. Like, you need to know how to read those words before they're going to mean anything to you. So, thinking of it more as this umbrella has been really helpful for me. And that honestly, before we started this, I was like, oh, yeah, bloom. Like, you think about how you think about things. What is there to argue about? But now I'm just like fixated on this freaking taxonomy of it because I don't think it's a taxonomy at all. I think it's very much more a physics problem than a biology problem. And at the core, at the nucleus of learning is understanding, which is to me what I got the most out of this article. Is this quest for what is understanding? Like that's the driving question here. How do you define it? And I loved there was one sentence that I wrote on every single piece of paper this morning that let's see if I can find it on here. What in fact are the values embodied? What's the point of understanding? What's the point of education? Because you can honestly, I love using Bloom, but it's not rigorous enough to define that for a system. And to me, if you're really thinking about what is understanding, it's that understanding in the middle of the nucleus, and all these pieces of Bloom, all the pieces of think are floating around, are photons and electrons, or protons and electrons. We're all out on the edges. And depending on what you're focusing on and what you value and what your systems value, those things on the edges are going to sway and be different and look differently. But at the core of it is this definition of understanding. And that to me is where I'm like, yes, please tell me what to
Yes.
understand.
Tell me what to understand,
Yes.
and though how subjective that could be based on that system that you might
Yes.
be a part of. And he elaborated on that. The first thing I wrote down, I know you were right there on page one. I wrote, I'm old, so I printed it out. It's hazardous to adopt a method of classification. Oh, you got it too. Of the,
Yeah.
well, you're not old, but we're the nerds, right?
Yeah.
Of education without first analyzing the values implicit within the classification. I wrote Tom Bedard. Tom Bedard.
Yes.
You cannot reflect on your practice until you've identified your values. And so I think that value and understanding 100% has to be together. 100%.
Yes.
Because if you're not able
I'm
to come back to that, you, then you spend your entire career life experience being inconsistent and all over the map in my world. You're saying one thing and doing another.
Mm-hmm.
right. I'm actually going to back up real quick because I think we all started with the assumption that people listening have definitely seen Bloom's taxonomy and can like mentally kind of pull it up. But I do want to real quick give what the stages, for lack of a better word, are, right? Or not stages, because I don't think anybody used stages, but the different
Categories?
aspects, the categories. There you go. Yes, thank you. And so that changed between Bloom's original conception, and then the Ormel article is based off of Bloom's original conception, and now we use the revised that was revised in like 2001. So I'm going
Yes.
to give the revised one, which everyone's more familiar with, and it didn't make so there were two big changes between the original and the revised. So the original taxonomy categories were knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. And so the current categories that are in a different tab are remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating.
And was
So
it
the big
literally a
shift
word swap? Was it just a word
so the big
swap?
shift was going from noun to verb to give educators this common vocabulary for what they want the children to be doing, or children, students to be doing at the end of it to be able to demonstrate. So that was the big thing, but also that you talk about understanding, right? Because originally Bloom said comprehension, and the decision to change that to understanding was based on common educator vocabulary. So they could have very easily just said comprehending, but they changed it to understanding, even though Bloom himself really struggled with saying, well, you can do a lot of stuff and not really understand the concept.
Mm, true.
But educators had a good enough understanding of understanding to be able to make that the second level per
Okay, so that
definitions.
helps me initially because I was like, wait, when did these words change and are we using them interchangeably? And does that mean that if thinking, although I think there's dissension a little amongst the ranks here, but not really thinking it's a hierarchy, but it was presented as a hierarchy. So does that mean in the original that evaluation was the tippy top? That's where we want to be able to be?
So the original, so I'm looking at it side by side. The original,
Knowledge.
the top was evaluation.
Valuation. So now that is parallel with creating. So now
Yes.
creating is, interesting. And when I think of the word creating, I'm thinking of creativity and I'm thinking about how sadly, how often that is the first thing that gets squashed in most educational environments, whether adult children, middle school, high school, or otherwise. I mean, unless you're in an art class or the one of the arts classes. And yet I know everybody here would agree that if you don't have creative problem solvers, it really doesn't matter how high your SAT scores were.
And I
Yeah.
would also say that creating itself has been co-opted in this worksheet vomit way. They're like, oh, we are creating. We have cut out the life cycle of a butterfly and glued it on a paper. Like that, yeah. Even if I make a child draw it all themselves, is that still creating or is that just copying?
No,
Like
copying.
we've gone so far. We've jumped the shark, you guys. Like, as
Right.
a whole field.
Right. Which is where I think I was really drawn to Fink because Fink's idea of,
Not knowing that I was supposed to have previously been thinking of Bloom as a hierarchy, that's kind of how I always saw it. I mean, not in this
that's,
flower format, but I mean, I always saw it like dancing together, and you're going to have some here and not some here and some there. Um,
And me, stupid biology brain, keeps saying a frog and a salamander, one is not better than the other. Like they are
right.
at different places on a hierarchy, but you still have a frog in one hand and a salamander in the other. And aren't they both equally important?
yes.
Yeah. And now we're back at Orwell and his idea
Yep.
of,
Sorry.
the levels of activity corresponding to the functionally defined levels in a society. And the idea of reducing people to their role, right? So Orwell compares a type of person in terms of like social status, right? So an unskilled man, quote unquote, their type of job needs knowledge of specifics, where a skilled man the job requires comprehension. A manager needs to apply, a scientist needs to analyze, a civil servant needs to synthesize, and a politician needs to evaluate. And so, I do think that's how Bloom was introduced to me. I think I didn't have the benefit of really seeing it as these connected concepts, but
Mm,
that's certainly my understanding of why everyone's harping on everyone, why people who are asking for these words want to see those higher levels because they want this idea of raising social status. So rather than, oh, here we are back at policy, rather than valuing everyone and offering everyone what they need to live and thrive, they need to climb and fight and become quote unquote higher, right? Rather than just applying and
I
knowing
would
a beat.
apply the revised words to that same type of person list that an unskilled man would need to be able to remember. A skilled man needs understanding. A manager is still application. Scientist or technology is still analyzing. Civil servant or director is now evaluating, and a politician is creating.
Yeah, no, I think it all still, but I do think that kind of
But it
shows you the folly of giving them that hierarchy.
Yes. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Although making things up is under the creating. So I
Well, and I really
anyway.
put these apart application and creativity. I do understand how Bloom meant them distinctly, right? Being able to see a problem and solve it, but that feels very closely related to creativity in my mind, right? Creative problem solving, being able to make something feels very closely related to being able to apply the knowledge
Hmm.
in a way that I think evaluating maybe doesn't feel as close to me. I know, like
True.
Tiffany's protons.
What are you thinking of? What?
Oh, sorry, just your
Uh,
protons, electrons, and the
oh, yes, yes,
nucleus,
yes.
right? Like if the nucleus is
Yeah.
creativity and we've got these little spinning nanoparticles, um, I feel like these ideas around the sides are, can come closer and farther apart, which I think is exactly what you're saying about the taxonomy. It's just about where they connect.
Mhm.
But what I found great about Fink was so Fink has these ideas of foundational knowledge, application, skills, and integration, which all align with segments of Bloom's taxonomy. Fink added in learning how to learn, caring about the
Mhm.
subject matter, and the human dimension. And that just stood out to me as someone who works with early educators and going, oh, like, yeah, of course. The complaint about PD from anyone who hates going to PD days is I don't care about this. And so, how do we, as presenters, say, this is why you should care? This is the human piece of it. This isn't just a bunch of either dry theory or, something for somebody who hasn't been in a classroom in 1,000 years. This is how it impacts your direct work. This how it impacts your children and families.
I would go further and say, this is how I care about you as an adult learner.
Mhm.
This is how I care about your ability to learn how to learn, not just reflecting on the children, right? Like when you're in that adult learning sphere, I'm teaching them how to learn about children, but if I can't apply those same building blocks to my presentation to you as an adult, then like my philosophy of education has just fallen apart in front of my hands.
Yes.
So, I mean, that comes back to that adult learning piece for me is how do you do that for grown-ups? What does that look like for grown? It's very easy to say what that looks like for a preschooler. I care about you. I wipe your butt. I wipe your nose. But like, I'm not doing that for my grown-ups. So
Well, I'm
I
not
really am
sure if
interested to hear from you, Lisa. Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure if they've been, this is a gross generalization. I'm not sure if our training programs afford early childhood people the opportunity to become curious about children. And I
Mhm.
think and I'm gonna just own it, I am to my core wickedly curious about children and how they interface with each other, with the world, with their grown-ups, with the dog. Like I could just sit and watch kids play in the backyard for the rest of my life, and my brain would be like making connections constantly. Now, what I've been actually working on a paper about can you teach somebody to become curious about that, or you're either curious about it or you're not curious about it, and then what's the trajectory? So if you're already curious about it, you're going to be a little easier to have in the classroom, in the workshop room, and I'm going to probably tell within the first 6 seconds of getting started talking who you are, because your body is showing me that you're already with it. So there's
This portion.
right then there's a dance there is like it's not my job to convince anybody that you should be curious, but what is the thing that will get them curious? It might not be a kid staring at a puddle, but maybe it's the fact that if they go from 10 minutes of free play to 30 minutes of free play, all of a sudden their behavior issues go away, right? So maybe I'm meeting them there, and from there they become curious. Some people want to know how to make Play-Doh so that they can go have something for the kids to do. Some people want to know why you should be doing Play-Doh, right? It's like you got to meet the grown-ups where they are, just like how we meet them, the kids, where they are. But as a person working with grown-ups, you still have to be curious about that. I am forever curious. Okay, 20% of the room is already leaning in because I don't know, the energy, the enthusiasm, the passion is coming across and they're there for it. Other people are waiting for me to name drop, right? They want to know what article to go back and read. And other people are waiting for some kind of a TikTok video that I'm going to circle back to that I didn't do. But you know what I'm saying? Like you got to meet them where they are, but you're not going to be willing to do that if you're not curious about the umbrella that Tiffany was mentioning. And so I'm curious currently about what happens when you have people working with people in this capacity, whether adult learners or children, who just aren't curious. And it really seems to be a struggle to find the thing that that gets them to want to be curious, and then it gets a little existential, like who am I to get, who am I to want you to be curious about it? Something like, as long as you're not getting in the way, I don't need you to be like, whoa, I don't need that from you, because I can tell when it's fake anyway. But approaching it with a curiosity, and not a day goes by that I don't like circle back to one of the nuggets that I've gotten over the last 30 years. It's not going to be in their head if it hasn't been in their hands, and it's not going to be in their hands if it hasn't been in their heart, which means if they don't care about it, if they're not curious about it, if and that's not even a negative thing. Like, I hope that's not coming across. I'm not implying that you should be. I'm just saying, we haven't yet found the thing that like lights your fire, that makes you want to know more, to understand more. So until we find that connection, I might be, give a kid a hammer and everything's a nail, because I'm only using what works for me, and I'm not making room for the fact that this isn't the tool you need in order to be successful. So I think a lot of it comes back to time. And I think
Mhm.
we don't give people time to muck about. And that circles back to the adult play conversation. When was the last time you set well, Tiffany, this is a trick question for you, that you set 25 adults free and loose in the woods? And you probably did it yesterday. And, which is so amazingly exciting. But that's not what your run-of-the-mill child development early childhood major is probably getting in their classes. And then they show up, and where do you start? Where do you start? I mean, Tiffany and I have talked about training and professional development, and that whole pipeline. We've been talking about that since I've known you. 15 years at least we've been
Very
talking about
beginning.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's just a use case for more autonomy, more play, and more freedom. And it is a case to look at Bloom's taxonomy and say, okay, what are the students doing in elementary school, in middle school, and high school that's allowing them to truly apply and analyze and create and play with these ideas? And having that freedom, I think, is what creates the caring, right? I think for me, anyway, my experience, I don't care about things that I can't change or do anything with or about. And if schooling has been presented to you as these are the facts, this is what you need to know, this is what you need to do, and end of story, of course you're not going to care because you don't have any autonomy within that. Tiff, I saw you take a bunch of notes while Lisa was talking. I'm curious what you were.
What was I writing about? Oh, I was writing about uh there's that curiosity is not reflected in Fink's taxonomy, nor is joy, nor is love. And I feel like those is this back to the very beginning of you can't Maslow. You have to Maslow before you think. Just think about it. Uh, and I agree completely that curiosity in my mind is you're not going to have anything else before you have curiosity. And I'm also really thinking about John Muir Law as my favorite naturalist, who has a quote that curiosity is the best form of love.
Mm.
And I think that's something that we all, as people who are nerds that read about this in our free time, carry with us through this work, is that we're very curious about, really, when you think about what we're talking about today, it's like we're curious about which list of verbs is better.
Which list wins?
Yeah. Yeah.
But Tiffany,
And
your
it's
comment just made me think that, because it's true. We all started out curious. So
Mhm.
somewhere along the way, that was either allowed to continue. You're not born without curiosity.
Mhm.
That might need a disclaimer of some sort, but I can't think right now on the spot of what it would be. But, most, I'll pull a page from my cuber. most people are born curious.
Mhm.
Is there room to say that application of an existing taxonomy is the reason for the squelching of some element of curiosity because somebody was trying really hard to get you to synthesize or evaluate or analyze or apply that we were missing the forest for the trees?
I
There,
think what was
Yeah.
really interesting about seeing Fink, so one of the articles was student achievement of course learning goals in an asynchronous distance learning course redesigned using Fink's taxonomy of significant learning. Sorry, there's a mouthful, but I wanted to get the full title in there. But it was a course, it was a gen ed course at the Ohio State University that was redesigned to use Fink's taxonomy. And they talked about bringing in the human element in art, in poetry, in creative endeavors that the students were exposed to and then expected to journal about, like their own responses to bring in that human dimension. And I do think it's hard to see someone else caring so deeply and then not care. I do think there's an element of caring and curiosity being contagious, which is where I think this is a
Mhm.
really interesting place to go.
I would be curious. Now I'm going to go read that paper because did it have like results? Did people report enjoying those classes more than they had in the past or took more
It,
away? I would be curious some of that pre-post data, if simply by adding that element, which took no time, if you think about it, on the part of the professor to say, keep a reflective journal.
right. Yeah, so they were actually measuring whether the students met those learning goals based on the assignments given. And so, yeah, and they had they pulled a few samples from the student journals. It was about the course was about Americans' relationship with medication, and that included, prescription and self-prescribed. And so there was one line in here where someone in their journal talked about having developing a much deeper understanding of addiction and where that self-medication comes from based on that exposure to the art. I can't remember if it was a poem or what medium it was, but the art relating to the topic. Right. And I mean, how much, I mean, I'm sure we've all seen educators who discover the poem, The Hundred Languages, and go, oh, right. So
Mhm.
building in that piece of art that others have created, that work that others have created, that brings in that heart, that humanity, I think is so crucial. And it isn't brought into learning nearly enough at any level, I don't think.
What you just said made me think that what Fink, my very naive today only understanding, is that he cast a net to include what people are already bringing into the classroom, right? You're showing
Hmm.
up with that
Mhm.
stuff, whether the professor makes room for it or not. And so simply now just making room for what already you're bringing with you, I can see how that would 100% increase somebody's willingness to buy in, to pay attention, to evaluate, to understand, to observe, to comprehend, right? I can, it's like you saw me, and you made room for me. And yeah, that I don't know, to me there's still such a part that like doesn't everybody just do this? And that can be a roadblock for me because I never want it to come across snarky, but like really, we have to teach you to like cast that net and make room for learners, grown-ups? Like, I mean, and that's a whole entire conversation. But I
I
do,
think
but I
that's
do
easy to
wonder.
happen though. I think it's easy to miss it though, because I'm passionate about this. Therefore, I assume you're passionate about this and taking a step
Mhm.
back and bringing in the art, bringing in the humanity. I do think I can see why it's necessary, right? And I think I learned that as a director pretty quickly that, I can be super passionate about this aspect of child development. And that does not mean my teacher gives a flying fuck. And so no
Mhm.
matter how much I talk to them about it, I need to
Uh-huh.
bring in what they want, like you said, Lisa and Tiff both earlier, right? It's finding where that curiosity lies and trying to kindle it. And I think this idea of the human dimension, bringing in that external art, is such a way to do that. Because I think you're right, Lisa. I think it's easy to say, like, yes, of course, we're all curious. How can you not be? But I think it ignores that, all three of us in the Zoom room are in a fairly privileged position of being able to fully throw ourselves into the thing that we are passionate about. And
True.
Mhm.
that can't be true of everybody in every class.
Well, and it might be that there exists an element of curiosity, but it's just not being highlighted in that particular forum or space, right? So it's not like they're not curious. They're just curious about stuff that maybe we're not talking about. And, I don't think it doesn't take that much energy. And this goes back to what Tiff said about approaching the audience or approaching the grown-up learners with the same level of caring. Is if I find out a week and a half into a 13-week course that I'm teaching that somebody is really into XYZ, I am going to find a way to integrate that into it for everybody. Not just like, here, this is a special thing for David, but like, let's bring this in, and where I can be too quick is say, well, that's just what good teaching looks like, right? And I can be a little inappropriately like, well, duh, if you know, you should be doing that. And should, coulds, woulds, whatever, that's neither here nor there. Um, but I think that that also comes with a sense of confidence, right? If you've been doing it long enough, you feel that you can go off script, so to speak. You might age into
Mhm.
becoming
Mhm.
a little bit more comfortable saying, okay, I'm going to choose to deviate from today's lesson. And I don't even think I would make an announcement. You just kind of embed it, right? You apply it. I keep trying to come back to some of these verbs, some of these words. But I do think that I'm loving if Fink blew everybody's mind by adding the learning how to learn and caring and human, then good on him. How sad though that it had to be added and that it blew people's minds, right? Because it was happening anyway. You just didn't know it was happening. I mean, to me, it's like I draw that square of cognitive development, language literacy on one side, and social, emotional, and physical on the other, and how out of balance it's been. I feel like Fink just went, okay, hold on, we've been neglecting this entire other side of what people bring to the table, and he named it. So, good on him. If you're listening, Dr. Fink, that would be awesome. Maybe he'll come on your show next and talk about it.
Thanks, Dr. Fink.
Right.
I'm also assuming he's a doctor.
Yes. Pretty sure.
Are we assuming he's a he?
He is a he.
Yeah. Okay.
I've seen, yeah. There was some piece of writing that referred to him as him, so I'm using that one.
Gotcha.
And I
Okay.
found a website that had a photograph, like a headshot.
Mhm.
Um, so what I'm feeling like we're on the same page, but also thinking about how it might be applicable to our individual areas of work and interest.
I think
Yes.
that's what I want to see next is like what is the best possible example of this in action,
Oh, that's a good follow-up.
Like
right?
in
Like,
course design, or sorry, I'm
yeah, in adult
okay.
education, in course design, in course design, because yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I feel like it's still such a like when we think about what is possible for an adult course,
Mhm.
like y'all were talking about the incorporation into that online. We added art to an online course, and my thought was like, oh, barf, I would take that course because it sounds easy. Like we're not actually thinking
Okay.
about like how do you design an adult course that is the best practiced, highest quality adult learner environment that doesn't have the constraints of our current system. How would you use that? How would you use Fink's taxonomy to do that? Would you
Can
use
I go
Fink's
back to
taxonomy? Yeah.
can I go
Yep.
back to the course sounded easy? Like I am
Yeah.
curious, was it specifically that article or in terms of
No,
what
just
makes an easy
just
course, I
like
guess?
uh online courses that you get to do touchy-feely things. Like, I want to know who's signing up for that course. I want to know if they remember the course now. At the end of it, of course, they're going to remember the things that weren't having to sit and do homework. They're going to remember, like, hey, this was lovely and different and engaged my brain in a different way. But is it the best way to engage an adult learner? And I'm like very anti-online course that I really struggle to see how that can really get to the depth that we're trying to get for true understanding in a way that doesn't leave so much to be desired.
I'm going to
That's not to
answer
say that
that.
that's not to say that I don't agree with on like I don't disagree with online courses. I think they have a time and a place, but I feel like there's this extra pressure on it now in a way that makes me wonder, are we making these environments for adults, or are we making them out of convenience? And sometimes you need
Both.
that convenience. Yeah. So
I
that's
think it's
that's what
both.
that's what this makes me think about. Go, Lisa, go.
I think it comes back to relationships 100%. 100%. Like even just so when you guys say courses, in my brain, I'm thinking like a college course that meets online once or twice a week and it's a 13-week session. I experience those classes as a student getting my second master's currently. I also give 90-minute, 2-hour online workshops. And the times that I've done it where people book a series like once a month, by the third or fourth class, there's an entirely different vibe than the very first class. And that's meeting once a month. So if you were meeting twice a week for 13 weeks, I would imagine that that relationship component would start bubbling up, or I would hope that it would start to bubble up a little bit. My experience with doing and sponsoring and hosting online workshops, one and done, right? Maybe a couple or maybe a series, is that after doing the work for 30 years, but only really doing online stuff since COVID, the people who often come to the ones I put on come for 90 minutes of connection with other people that are like-minded. Like they're not coming to listen. Well, I can't say that. Half of the room knows what I'm going to be talking about. They've read the books, right? They know, they've seen me live. They know they're coming for that boost, right? They're coming for something else that I don't think you can capture in one of these action verbs. You could tease out an action word if we need to make that 90-minute session count, right? We could apply something like backwards, we can apply something to it. But I think that human element that sorry, I keep wanting to call him, oh, it is fake. The human element piece, that's why I think if I spend any more time investigating this topic, it's going to be with that. Or the next time I do a session, I'm going to be looking through a different lens, to see whether in person or online or not. But I think it's the connection and the relationship, what is she going to say next?
Right. And it's that it's co-creating, right? When you're in relationship with people within a course, you're co-creating the course by necessity, right? Kind of like to your point about a good teacher adapts to the students that are with them, right? You have to be able to co-create with your students no matter whether they are 1 year old or 27 years old, or, that's a crucial piece of making it relevant, making it meaningful. And so when you have those one-off 90-minute sessions where you're talking for the whole time, you you can build in to the best of your ability time to shout out in large group and small group, but you need that time together. And yeah, that's not accounted for in any of these metrics, whether it's time dedicated outside to study, time dedicated, the time span of learning.
Mhm.
And that's another interesting rabbit hole to dive into for how long a course should be to
Mm.
to be meaningful. And To Tiffany's point, I think I've done a lot of my learning online, right? I did my bachelor's and master's both fully online. And I think there are so many opportunities for it to be either terrible, didactic, sit, memorize, stay at the quote unquote bottom of Bloom, right? Remember, feed
Mm.
it back to the test.
Mhm.
Or in a thoughtfully designed course where people have the opportunity to bring their full selves, to be able to actually create, to bring in their outside lives, again, thinking early childhood, because that's what I was doing while I was studying, bringing in their experiences and analyzing through the course knowledge and creating and synthesizing and doing all of those great higher level things once you have that shared knowledge that you all remember.
So are you saying I've never taken a good online class? I think that's what I'm hearing today. They're not all bad.
They're not. They're not. Some of them are horrible. Um, some of them you
Taking
can
those
tell
ones, you
that.
guys.
Yeah, you come take some other one. Maybe give it another go is what I'm gonna say. Give it
Okay,
another
okay.
try. Um, but I mean, and that's a whole other conversation, and I don't know if that's one y'all want to have, like just how different it is if it is all I'm gonna do is show you a PowerPoint. That's a different vibe than like this. As it was it pre-recorded? Is there time to ask questions? Is it 500 people because it's just I'm reading a paper and then go on your merry way? Or are there 20 people and we can actually pause? Do I know that there's a follow-up session tomorrow and I can, you know what I'm saying? Like all that stuff
Yeah.
that plays into it. Now am I thinking about Bloom and Fink when I put together an online workshop? No. Should I be? I don't know. I don't know. I
I
think I
think it's so
agree
easy
with
to see them as
Maslow.
wolf words.
Say again.
Sorry.
Well, yeah. Yeah. If somebody needs them, I would rather spend time teaching other people how to find the connections between the play and the wolf word than to be having to figure out how to apply the wolf words to what Liz you just said kind of at the bottom. It just seems so basic. It seems so like, really? We have to jump. It said my internet state was unstable, so I don't know if I froze there.
We got most of it, but maybe not the whole thing. Right. But I think that's the entry point, right? Like to your point of, I think so, of seeing it as putting the words there so people know that it's important. But I do think that it's value, and that's how I came into this. I came into this with total fatigue, learning objective writing fatigue. And like, I cannot believe we can't just broaden our definition of what learning is. And we have to keep using these same words. And then when you actually go and look at Bloom and look at Fink and look what all of these other brilliant people have written about why they're significant, and you look at the process behind it, I guess I've gone from not caring to caring, right? And we're back to Fink, because you need to find that other
Very
person, that
curious.
curiosity, find that spark that started it.
Well, you just got my brain thinking about, at what point, or was it just trusted that applying these words to it? At what point are people just going to trust? Will we be trusted that we know what we're doing and we're not needing to keep applying these verbs to rationalize or justify how we're spending our time together?
All right, y'all, we talked for a while, so there is going to be a part 3. And thank you so much for joining us again. And I will be back in your ears in 2 weeks.